We're so back, man. We're so back. Because, like, this is the finale of the episode. The title card drops, theatrical malice, and then the curtain raises, and the song plays. Music to my ears, man. Like, legitimately, rezero really is a gift that keeps on giving. No matter how many episodes we get, somehow it rekindles the magic that the first episode gave me many, many years ago. Almost a decade at this point, which is crazy to think about. But it's been 4 long years since rezero Season 2 came to an end, and now, at long last, the continuation has started today in 2024 for Fall of Anime 2024. And this conclusion of the episode is so good. Like, the fact that they ended it here with Subaru's first death, it's just so thematically amazing, because it's like, it gets everybody's interest, their engagement, because it's like, oh, it begins. The nightmare, the loop, the first loop of Season 3 finally begins. And the way Subaru dies is just so horrific. Like, he says it himself in the best way. He feels sick. And I think that it is a perfect way to really just summarize the events he just witnessed with this moment here, where you see serious Roman and Conti just literally having this kid, this poor boy, being, like, applauded for what's about to happen to him. And anyone that watched this episode knows just how eerie and jarring this segment is. It is just horrifying. And I want to talk about this before I go any further, okay? When I read this for the first time in the light novel, I remember having a lot of confusion, because obviously you don't have pictures, you don't have sound, music, etc. to accompany the light novel words. So when you read this, I remember I was just like, why is the crowd applauding a Sin Archbishop, you know, serious like this? Like, why are they applauding this when you just see something so horrific on display with this poor boy about to, what it appears to be, just thrown off the tower? It is legitimately horrifying, and it's like, this is completely out of character for Subaru and all of our other characters. And I remember reading it in just a state of confusion, but as it slowly escalated and you just saw what was happening, you then eventually realized that whatever is going on here, it is the authority of Sirius doing this. And I think that's what makes this scene so terrifying, because you're left wondering, how? What's going on here? What is this individual's ability? What is she using to be able to cause everyone to die like we saw at the end of this episode? What was the true cause of Subaru's death? There's a lot of questions that come into mind, and the thing is that it's so fantastic, because the actions of Sirius's character here is completely in a different contrast to what actually she is saying with her very beautiful words. And let's talk about that for a second, because I think this really does set the tone going forward, what Season 3 is going to be like for at least Core 1. So, Sirius is a Sin Archbishop, and I think everybody, if you're here at this time, watching rezero, have seen rezero Season 1, seen rezero Season 2, you know the absolute menace, the evil that a Sin Archbishop is able to commit. I mean, let's look at, you know, Petalugius Romani Conti, well, you know, what Sloth did in, you know, Season 1. Absolute nightmare feel. Still, to this day, one of the best pieces of character acting and voice acting I have ever seen from an anime. It was truly something and a sight to behold in anime form. I will continuously, for the rest of my days, for the rest of my life, praise that certain episode where Sloth is introduced for the first time, because of just how excellent the performance actually was. And it was just such a memorial event, just to be able to see it and just how creepy he had, his vibes and everything. But to the main point is we saw the evil and the destruction just one Sin Archbishop could cause. And here's the thing, we saw multiple in this episode. I think everybody probably keyed in and noticed it. They definitely saw greed appear within this episode. Emilia brushed into him very quickly. You also see him walk off and all that. We know he has a lot of history with Crush's camp, and also with Rim as well, and Subaru's camp. So, and we also know the backstory of Emilia as well, and his involvement with Emilia's parents. So there's a lot of complications there. So we know it's not just, let's say, Sirius that is in the city of, the Watergate city of Pristella. There's also the Sin Archbishop of Greed as well. And let's be fair here, anyone that is watching the anime probably has seen the trailer. You have seen the PV of ReZero Season 3. And I think anyone realizes that definitely gluttony is involved if they've seen the PV trailer, and there's definitely a few others that you can definitely see within the PV trailers for the anime. So, factoring all of that in, you know that things are about to get really bad, because look at just the devastation one caused in Season 1, and now let's think about what multiple is potentially going to cause in the city. Thankfully, Reinhardt is in this city. Thankfully, all the main players, like the main characters, are in the city. Like Wilhelm, you have Reinhardt, you have Felt, Subaru, Garfield, you know, Otto, Amelia, you know, you have Priscilla. You get the point. We have our major cast of characters that we know about since Season 1 in this city. There's a lot of people. And so that means that there's a lot of things for people to be able to fight and be able to deal with the situation, but also a lot of people that potentially could die and be something irreversible if something goes wrong, aka what Subaru's greatest fear actually is. I'll get more into this in a second, but let's segue into just the episode length first. So one thing in particular I really want to point out is that this episode is an hour and 30 minutes. That's movie length. Like, that is not an average episode. This is not an average display of an anime. We're not dealing with the average anime anymore. We are dealing with something way beyond ascended level of an anime episode. Like, we have seen 45-minute episodes. We have seen an hour, like, exactly long episodes. But I think I could be wrong here. I think this is the first time I've ever actually seen a proper paced hour and 30-minute first episode. Like, usually when it's like multiple episodes, like let's say 3 episodes into one, it's compiled to where you could tell that it's just 3 episodes pressed into one. But the very design decision of this first episode of ReZero Season 3 is definitely designed around it being an hour and 30 minutes. You don't feel like there's any breaks in between the episode to where it's like multiple episodes shoved together. It does feel like an actual movie you're watching, or at least a part 1 to a movie. And I think that going into this and realizing the dedication that the staff had to put into just accomplishing a feat like this is very impressive, because it's like, anyone that knows anything about anime production, I don't pretend to know everything, but even if you know the bare minimum, making anime is difficult. Production, a lot of things could go wrong, and we have seen this with studios in the past, and that will continue to happen going forward in the future. And it does lead me to believe that the state of ReZero Season 3 is in a very good state for them to be able to actually do an hour and 30-minute first episode, because it covers a lot of content that needs to be covered in a good time frame for we can get into the actual meat of what Season 3 is going to be about. Because let's factor this in. Looking at the actual runtime of this episode, and we factor the normal length of an episode, and even if we're wanting to give leeway to ReZero's, you know, very like a flexible schedule. Like, for instance, when ReZero normally releases an episode, instead of it being the average length of, let's say, 20 minutes of content, ReZero might have 24 minutes of full-blown content for its episode, or sometimes even 26 minutes to 27 minutes, which is wild. I'll talk more about that in a second. But the thing is that, you know, even regarding that time frame, that means that covering all the content of this episode most likely would have been about 5 episodes in length. Like, let's see, 20 minutes per episode, so 3 episodes is, you know, obviously 60 minutes, and then you have an hour 30, so we're looking at about 4, maybe 5 episodes of content that this one episode covered. So imagine taking 5 episodes just to get to Subaru's first death. You can see where the season would have felt very slow-paced. A lot of people might have fell off from the season after such a long wait, but that's where the passion and love that Studio White Fox and the staff really has for the series. They've done this time and time again. Let's look at, you know, this first episode of Season 2. It was an hour long. The first episode of Season 1, it was also an hour long. Season 1 was so good and loved that they recompiled it with a director's cut and made every episode 59 minutes. So I think it speaks for itself that there is just so much love poured into the series and the runtime length that it's just like, I'm glad to see that it continues to keep its tradition even after almost a decade. And even the change of hands and directors at ReZero, or the people that work on ReZero at, you know, White Fox Studios, which that's another thing. Obviously, the team that is working on ReZero Season 3, it's not the exact team that we know and love from Season 1 and even Season 2. There's definitely a lot of newcomers that's probably working on this. I don't know the whole staff list, but I know there's a lot of people that have now joined in on the project. But it seems very clear to me that the ideology and the ideals that the previous teams had that worked on ReZero have definitely cemented themselves into the heart of Season 3's project. And I think that alone really speaks volumes about just the quality of what we could expect from Season 3. That just because there was a change of hands to a certain degree doesn't mean that the quality of ReZero is going to diminish. In fact, I would go at length to say that this episode is at the same tier or level of the highest quality episodes that Season 1 of ReZero had to offer. Which says a lot, because in the fan base for ReZero's community, a lot of people really love Season 1 of ReZero, and a lot of people disdain Season 2. Not because the content's bad. People love the story of Season 2. People love the regression. They love the voice acting and everything. But people didn't like Season 2 because the art quality was different. It was off. And reminder for people, when Season 2 of ReZero was coming out, COVID was at its greatest in Japan. It was really bad, ravaging a bunch of different animation studios in all of the country. And so there was a lot of problems with production, running behind schedule, all sorts of things with different companies and stuff. So ReZero is also affected. And despite being affected and having issues to overcome, they still delivered a high-quality Season 2, in my personal opinion. And so I think that Season 3 definitely will get those that really miss the aesthetic and the vibes they got from Season 1 back, and really happy with the direction Season 3 is going. Now, in terms of art direction as well, this does need to be talked about. The art direction definitely feels more in line with the light novel illustrations, which is completely fine by me. I've never really had a problem with the art direction shift. I mean, we've seen a little bit of it a while back when I talked about it in a different video. We already knew the art style was going to shift, but it definitely is more apparent now seeing it in movement that, yes, it definitely is more in line with the light novel illustrations, which that gets into the next big detail I want to discuss. So, ReZero in general, this first episode of Season 3, it really, I love how it doesn't feel like there's any wasted space. Now, obviously, all the content within this episode is important, and I just love how you can really get so much content out of this episode. Like, we have the Slice of Life segments at the beginning of the episode, getting to see, like, a year time skip and how Subaru, Beatrice, Garfield, and all of them are fitting in with each other, to the surprise meeting of finding about Julius's brother, to just seeing, you know, Subaru, he's constantly going to Rim's bedsides, you know, talking with her every single day, telling her what's going on, and you can get the impression he does this every single day. He talks with her. It's become a habit. It's become something that he constantly does, which just showcases his overall connection with Rim, and also how much he relies on her, because she was the first person that ever viewed him as a hero, but also someone that fully believed in him no matter what. It holds a very big significance in him. It's what keeps him pushing forward as an individual, and I think that looking at the entire sequence of events, this is a very beautiful scene. Just alone, there is so much content to really discuss in these brief little moments here of the episode in the first 15 minutes. Like, you also have the discussion of how Rosewall's interaction with the group is doing after the events of Season 2, with what Amelia had to go through, what Subaru had to go through, with his bet with Rosewall, everything. You can see that the relationship is still, to a degree, a little bit rocky with Rosewall, and it's going to take a lot of time to probably repair those bonds between them. Then, even disregarding that, we got to look at the situation with all the royal candidates going to this new Watergate city and trying to meet up and kind of have a slight vacation. Obviously, that vacation is not going to be a good vacation, as we clearly see at the end of the episode, but it's like all the royal candidates are meeting up and kind of discussing their accomplishments, what they've done in the last year, and this is a good time to segue into the time skip. So, basically, the beginning of this episode states that 1 year has passed since the events of Season 2, or since basically Subaru came into the world. And so, thanks to this, basically, Subaru's now grown quite accustomed to everything lifestyle within the world, but also his name has got to spread around the entirety of the kingdom. A lot of people recognize Subaru. A lot of people recognize his name. They might not know fully what he looks like, but they at least know Natsuki Subaru by name, and some of his accomplishments, either taking down the White Well, fighting against the Sin Archbishop, Sloth, and also taking down the other mob beast, the White Rabbit. So, looking at all these details, Subaru has become very famous. And obviously some things might be slanderous against him, but we gotta look at the cold hard facts. His reputation has definitely gotten a lot better, thanks to, you know, all the things he's done. And it's crazy to think that, like, his first introduction to the entire kingdom was him making himself look like a doofus, like a dumbass, in front of the entire throne room and all the royal candidates. He was just a laughingstock. He literally looked like a clown. And then in a few days' time, he takes down basically two prominent evil figures within the world that's plagued people for hundreds of years, basically. He takes them down, and in turn takes down the White Rabbit. Obviously, his name's gonna spread, and people's opinions on him are going to change, and they're gonna wonder, was he playing the fool and the clown just to put on an act to make people think he's weak, or is there something more to him? But I'm getting ahead of myself. One thing in particular that the beginning of the episode really wants to focus on is the character interactions, the character acting in general, Subaru's connection with Amelia, Amelia's connection with Subaru, Subaru's connection with Beatrice, Beatrice's connection to Subaru, and it's very beautiful. We just see a lot of character bonding within the episode, showcasing their growth and their maturity thanks to the events of Season 2, because obviously Subaru had to learn a lot to be able to believe in Amelia, that Amelia could do things on her own, and Amelia had to put trust in herself to be able to accomplish things without the help of others. There was a lot that was really going on within Season 2, and you could just see that. Like, this whole little segment where you see, like, Amelia and Subaru talking in the room alone here, it just speaks volumes about their current relationship, how they're able to talk about very difficult subjects in a mature fashion, without any arguments, without one side seeming like they knew more than the other. It was just a straight-up conversation between the two, and I like that. It really just progresses that development we saw at the end of Season 2 of ReZero. Now, another thing too, one of the big driving forces of why Amelia's camp is moving or going to Pristella, thanks to the call of Anastasia Hoshin, is because they found a magic crystal that theoretically could help the Great Spirit come back. Recall the Great Spirit, aka Puck. Now, we know everything that happened to Puck thanks to Season 2, and it's definitely had an everlasting impact on Amelia, and she has a lot of things she needs to ask Puck and question. Subaru does as well, because there was a lot of things left unanswered thanks to the interaction in Season 2. And so the question is, what will happen, and will they be able to bring Puck back in this season? I mean, there's a lot of objectives. I mean, let's look at, you know, just the conclusion of this episode alone. We know that there is multiple Sin Archbishops within the city. And anyone that's seen the TV trailer knows that, you know, it's not just Sirius here, it's not just Greed that's here. We know Gluttony is here as well, and potentially another figure as well. And so everything that is indicating into this episode that one of the objectives that Subaru could also accomplish, besides potentially recalling a Great Spirit like Puck back for Amelia, it's also potentially facing down with Gluttony to be able to recover the names of everyone that was lost, aka like Rim, and also others like Crush and other people that's been affected within the story. So there is multiple objectives that could be concluded within this arc of ReZero. Will that happen? You will have to see. I'm not going to spoil since I'm a source reader. But let's get into one big detail, and I want to discuss a lot of the character interactions and involvement and stuff that's been going on here. I really just love, like, Subaru and Amelia interacting, Beatrice and Subaru interacting. There's just so much wholesome and growth and content between the characters. I just cannot get enough of it. It is just something that really is magical, and I'll continue to talk about this for the rest of the season. Just all the payoff from the content of Season 1 and Season 2 really does matter, because we see it on full display, which is the reason why ReZero is just such a beloved story. Why so many people love ReZero is because Tape is just such a good writer with his characters. He can turn around and make a character that's just firstly introduced one of the most fascinating characters with just probably a few sentences. And I love that. He's a very gifted and excellent writer, and you can see it on full display with just how the characters are presented within the show, which also, this is also in due part to the staff being very excellent and wanting to give time and dedication to the series and not make it feel like, oh, the characters feel very flat. Because you can have amazing written plot, great characters, but if the anime doesn't present them right, it's not going to feel good. So I will give credit where credit is due, that the staff as well definitely needs to be praised for just presenting the story in a very enjoyable and digestible format for a lot of people to watch. Now, anyways, I want to segue into something with Garfield, because I think Garfield's character development is very important within this episode, because we get to see him meet with Mimi, and also him realizing that he is a small fish in a very large pond. He meets up with Reinhardt. He sees Reinhardt for the first time, and for a very long time, Garfield has basically, like, said that he's the strongest. He's very powerful, and obviously Subaru dragged him out of Sanctuary and allowed his worldview to open up and everything about that. Very important details and stuff, but basically, he's always felt he was very powerful. But encountering someone like Reinhardt has definitely shocked him to the core. It put him on edge. He realized that he is nothing in comparison to Reinhardt, and it really is... It's you can feel sad for, you know, Garfield, but it is something he needs to learn, is that he's not even, like, in potentially the top 10 or top 50 of the strongest people within the verse of rezero, and he is having a very hard realization of this, and he's trying to work through these emotions of just, like, how small he has been in this actual world. Now, one thing, too, as well, we get this little interaction, this, like, interaction with him thinking about Elsa. And I think that this is a very powerful scene, not just because of this, but also that we see Garfield having trauma. PTSD from his fight with Elsa, and that even though she is long gone, her very presence, her interaction with the cast is still there, and especially with Garfield. And we know she got killed by him, but Garfield says it himself. How he feels about the fight is that he feels that he got lucky. That's why he won. It wasn't because he was stronger than Elsa. It wasn't because he was more powerful. It wasn't because he, you know, he did it on his own. He got lucky, which is why he won in the end. If things would have been fair, he straight up would have lost. That's what he probably feels deep within his own soul. And so, even at that, one of the most pinnacle fights he's ever had in his entire life, he still feels like he's weaker than Elsa. Which says a lot about his current character development that's ongoing right now, and that he's not going to remain stagnant like he had at the end of Season 2, like, you know, just stay how he was. He's going to continue to develop, and I think that is one of the big reasons why I love Top A's writing, because no character goes without development. Every character gets it. It doesn't feel like one character just steals all the spotlight. Every character does get some time to shine and develop, and Garfield is obviously currently going through a little mini arc of his own, despite obviously other characters going through stuff as well. Which, that's a perfect segue to really talk about Reinhardt and Wilhelm. So, this little meeting under the moonlight, Subaru and Wilhelm talking, it's very beautiful, because it's been a very long time since Subaru got to really sit down and talk with him, because it's like, it's been over a year, and the last time he probably really had a true conversation with Wilhelm was basically after the events of the Well Hunt, and that's it. And so, after a long time has passed, and Subaru's name has stretched far and wide, and a lot of people recognize him, and Wilhelm even mentions this as well, you know, it's interesting to see just how he acknowledges that Subaru is very weak. He's powerless and all that, and pretty much cringe, but he still likes that version of Subaru, because it's admirable to see someone that, despite being so weak, so frail, is able to overcome the odds and actually achieve great feats that nobody else has done in hundreds of years. So I think that Wilhelm's conversation with Subaru is beautiful, because it's like Wilhelm is dropping his guard. He's putting down the blade. He's putting down the sword to fully have an actual intimate conversation with Subaru and be like himself. He's pushing aside everything, and kind of the way it feels like, he even mentions himself, it feels like he's talking with, like, his grandson, like a grandson or a son, and obviously this is more or less, like, you know, significant, because he wishes he could talk to Reinhardt as well, thanks to the aftermath of what happened to Wilhelm's wife, thanks to the White Whale killing her. So just, like, everything about, like, the situation, I really love, like, this little dynamic between the characters, and setting up for Wilhelm and Reinhardt to be able to fix the relationship and be better with each other. Now, anyways, disregarding that, we also have this little interaction with Wilhelm's son coming into the picture, Heinkel, and he, first impressions, exactly like I expected. He is an absolute, he's trash. Like, he is a bad person. Like, I do not like him. But he's a good character. Just because I don't like him as a person, he's still a good character. Because thematically, He needs to be there to cause tension between Reinhardt and Wilhelm, to strengthen their bonds and relationship, to be able to work things out. And there's definitely a lot of issues maybe Heinkel as well is not talking about that we're unaware of. There's probably development there, and maybe there's a lot of animosity. I mean, taking one look at his character, he's a drunk. He's a loser, he's a drunk, he even basically says it himself. He's basically just, someone that is a vice captain just to be a vice captain. It's just like a name only. It's clear he has a lot of low self-esteem, and he doesn't even like his own self. I mean, look how he treats himself and what he says about himself. So it makes you wonder what's going on there. Does he feel inadequate? Does he feel upset thanks to the loss of his mother? There's a lot of questions. Whatever the case may be, there's definitely a lot more complexity with his character besides him just being a trash bag. But even still, he does come off as an insufferable jerk within this episode of ReZero. Now, past all of this, we do need to talk about Sirius as a character and what's going on here. As I briefly stated at the beginning of this video, I love the thematic themes of the contrast of her character, how violently vicious she is, with her tone of voice just being so beautiful and mesmerizing. It is just such a perfect contrast and a great way to really display a Sin Archbishop, because they're supposed to be insane. They're supposed to be crazy, vile demons, basically. They're not supposed to be good people by any means. So, seeing this display from Sirius, it's great. It fits in line with what we've seen from Sin Archbishops thus far, with how deranged they can be, and it's very clear that just how Petalogius Romanicanti was deranged, all about love and sloth and all that. Sirius Romanicanti is in the exact same way, which that's another thing to talk about. What's going on with that? What's going on with the last name? Did Petalogius marry Sirius? What's happening there? And let's talk about that. So Sirius, I think everybody can easily see the resemblance to Fortuna. I think everybody sees it. You have to kind of be blind or have forgotten the events of Season 2 to not notice it. To the hair color being very silverish, looking like an elf, to the eye color as well being purple, pinkish hue. It's very clear her very design gives off Amelia Mother vibes. That's what she gives. And thanks to what we know of, thanks to the events of Season 2, with what Pandora did to Petalogius, makes you wonder what's going on here. Did something happen to Fortuna's body? Is this Pandora doing something like this? There's a lot of questions. Once again, this is not spoilers. Do not worry, anime onlys. I'm just throwing things out there to make you speculate. Because it's like, what is happening here? Like, you can easily see the connection. It's not being hidden. It's in your face. It's not... It's there. So, what's happening? Like, what is this? Like, is this character, know about the history of Petalogius and all that, and then wanted to look like Fortuna? Or, like, what's going on there? So, that is something I want to bring to everybody's attention by just how she acts within this episode. And also with her constantly saying love, love, love in such a very deranged way, like sloth. It also seems very similar to what happened to him thanks to Pandora. So I'll leave it at that. Anyways, I really think that overall, an amazing episode of ReZero. I could not have asked for a better showcasing of content. And the fact that it's an hour and 30 minutes and no part of this episode felt more important than the others, I think really just goes to show the lengths and quality that the staff is going to put into this show. Season 3 is, I'm glad it's finally here. We've waited long enough, and I cannot wait for episode 2 next week. Now, I do want to say a few things before I wrap up the video. FYI, ReZero Season 3 has been confirmed for 38 episodes, so don't worry about that. It's going to be multiple cores. On top of that, ReZero Season 3 will be covering Arc 5 and, yes, Arc 6 content. There is enough episodes with 38 episodes, and assuming they're going to do hour-long episodes more than just this episode, there's definitely enough episodes to cover the content in a very good fashion for Arc 5 and Arc 6. So anyone concerned about that, don't be. That's all I'll say. Anyways, be safe. I love you guys. I'm happy to be able to talk about ReZero again. Chibi out.